I was recently privy to a documentary that was sent to me for review. This is sent courtesy of Fuse Media or Fuse TV. I believe the young lady's name that provided this to me. I want to give proper credit, Dinah White. Thank you for asking me to do this review. This is a review that will release on Fuse TV in the U.S. November 11th. So this is roughly about 2 days before it's released that I'm recording this. Of course, there's been a little bit of an embargo because they, didn't want anything to go out too far ahead of the documentary. So I've trying to be careful about that. But in any case, the documentary is called Out in the Ring. And if you're not aware, this is a documentary that is built on and around LGBTQ wrestlers and talking about their path and the history thereof and whatnot. I did sit and watch it. Like I said, I was provided a preview to that and asked if I would be so kind to look it over. I said yes. Much like any documentary that I've ever seen, it's got its ups and it's got its downs. I mean, quite honestly, I don't want to be misleading and say this is great from top to bottom or it's bad all the way through. No. It's got its ups and it's got its downs, much like any documentary. So I am not going to give a bunch of spoilers or anything of that nature. What I'm going to do is I'm going to provide you the essential path that the documentary takes. If you choose to watch it or if you have used media to look at it, that, of course, that then falls on you. But I will also be honest and say that I do not expect everyone to flock to watch it. This is an open documentary, and it feels to me more like it is there to provide the non-LGBTQ a look on the lives and paths, frustrations, rewards, and everything in between that some of these performers have had to face. It comes off to me that way because, making this documentary for that community seems like it's preaching to the choir. This is more of an educational piece. I would kind of summarize it as, even though it has entertainment elements in it. It's mostly this person had to deal with this. This is what the wrestling industry had been. This is where we would like it to go. That's a lot of what I got out of watching this. So I'm going to start with where I think it kind of begins. It opens up with a clip from Game Changer Wrestling with a promo on representation in the LGBTQ plus community, speaking to the fans. And listen, most wrestling fans at this point are very aware, especially if you subscribe to things like Fight TV. There's a lot of different wrestling promotions that exist out there, and some hold events like this. Effie was on this documentary throughout, and a lot of people know that he holds events, I want to say around WrestleMania weekend. I mean, he probably does all year round, if I'm going to be completely honest. But that is the one that I am personally aware of, Effie's big gay event that I've seen that exist on the Fight TV app. So I'm aware of it. I haven't been to one, but I'm aware of it. So that's why I say I would imagine that most of the people here you've seen or are aware of or some form of fashion. And unless you're brand new to professional wrestling, I am pretty much sure that you have seen, watched somebody who is gay or lesbian or trans or whatever the case may be, whether you knew it or not. That there's, a lot of performers out there who exist in different walks of life. That I don't think that is any secret. The good of this documentary, I think, happens somewhere in once it gets rolling, I would say past the first 10 minutes, and it starts to do the sit-down interviews with people. Yeah, people here like Susan Tex Green, and they're talking about people like Pat Patterson and Chris Colt, Sandy Parker, who, this was educational for me. I was not aware of who Sandy Parker was, nor her, and not being aware of who she is, of course, I could not be aware of her sexuality or what she meant to, or what she had to go through, or, anything like that. Adrian Street, who, they talked about, Adrian Adonis. And so this section of the documentary is primarily focused on past performers. Those past performers having to either hide, not being seen. Some were out, but they were, I don't want to say minimized, but that's the only really word I can say for it, just minimize for it. And you have the overall narrative within that is when you did have somebody, and I'll use Adrian Street and Adrian Adonis, two different performers, same name, pretty much the same or very similar gimmick. At least when Adrian Adonis became the adorable Adrian Adonis. A lot of what was portrayed at that point was if you were a gay character or a gay persona, it was easy heat. And yes, it was very easy heat. And I don't think that also is very surprising. Was it proper? No, but that's just the state that wrestling was in at the time. I once said that if you want to see the progress of America and its media over the years, go watch a Looney Tunes cartoon. Go watch one from like all the way back to the when they originally created it to maybe the 70s. Because if you looked at that, if you were anything other than a straight white male between the ages of 18 to 35, you probably were going to have a shot taken at you. Wrestling was no different. You came from another country, you had to be a foreign menace. You're Asian, you knew martial arts just instantaneously. If you're black, you had a hard head. If you're Samoan, you climb trees. That's just the state that wrestling was in. I'm not saying that it was good, but that's just where it was. And then it moves on to talking about some of the persons today, or at least let me get into the 90s influence. Because they did talk about that for a while, the introduction of Goldust and Billy and Chuck and things of that HLA, hot lesbian action. If you saw those, oftentimes Goldust was kind of portrayed as predatory, even though he was a revolutionary character. I mean, and he was. The Goldust character was revolutionary. It wasn't presented as that before, but it was also given an out in that this was all mind games. That seemed to be somewhat polarizing within that. It's like some people thought it was a revolutionary thing, and then and the same thing with Billy and Chuck. They were given an out. They portrayed these things on screen, but they were given an out to no longer be gay on screen. Let's just say that. And I understand that I am going to view that in an entirely different way because I don't fall into this category. I can't view it in the same way. So I have to take their word for it and how it affected them as a fan and what have you. Because what I saw, and I'm using the Billy and Chuck wedding angle in this. What I saw when I saw that, I thought this was one of the greatest segments ever done, just because of how Bischoff pulled off the makeup and wait a minute, did I just say three? That whole thing. I was wanting to see how they were going to get out of it, because I was like, I knew this. I said, this isn't going to last. Even when Billy Gunn started that, I was like, this is not going to last. I don't know how they're going to get out of it, but it's not going to go any further than necessary, because he's not gay. And there's only so long he's going to be able to do this on screen and, and move his career forward, I guess, for lack of a better term. But what persons within the community saw was that they should have gone the extra step, and presented something that was inspiring to, young viewers watching and things of that nature. Again, this is the part of it I can't really comment on that, because I don't have, a dog in that fight, or I'm not able to see it through their eyes. I can only say within the documentary that it makes a fair point with me as to how they felt in wanting some sort of representation and wanting somebody to look up to and what have you. Going back to Adrian Adonis and Adrian Street, like I said, despite the fact that they did this, and for the time it was an easy thing to do, just to play that and then walk into a arena full of high testosterone males and get a lot of heat, which was the only reason that these persons were created. Adorable Adrian and Adrian Street, even though both of them were Adrian Street in particular was known as legitimately tough. That's just something that went across the board in the wrestling world. Sorry about that. But anyway, the end portion of the documentary I thought was well done, speaking with a lot of the wrestlers that are currently wrestling, who at this point still felt some hesitation, not animosity, but just not being able to come full circle just yet, or fully out just at the moment, and having to jump over those hurdles, even at this point in their life. But there's also the portion where they're talking, it's a little bit easier than what it had been. Steps had been made. The downside, well, before I get to the down, there are other things there that, I kind of agreed with. I'd never met AC Mack, who is a wrestler here. Did not know that he was gay. Ashton Starr, I did meet. I had talked to, and I've actually called a couple of his matches. He did a few intergender matches. They are on my channel. But they talked about things that I already knew. But the next person may not have known that. It's like in the South, it's very easy to get heat if you go into a rural area as a black man, just in general. It's like just being the bad guy there is going to almost instantaneously get you heat. To be both is going to be, that much more. Which again, that wasn't so far-fetched for me to understand. I had been in those rural areas, and I've seen the performers and I've seen the fans, so I knew that what they was talking about in that regard, perfectly, absolutely legitimate. They talk about the position of this within WWE and AEW, not at the same time. These two different segments, so to speak, where the WWE, for all intent and purposes here, is kind of positioned in that's a nice way to say it, somewhat self-serving. And other wrestling promotions, for that matter, is somewhat presented as a little self-serving in that, well, they put on these events to showcase LGBTQ persons in order to make themselves look good. Again, it's only so far that as an outsider can comment on that, so I'm taking their view. But if they were asking me, then I would say, yes, of course they probably are. It's the WWE. And let's be honest, is only so far that they are going to go as a corporation. They are not an independent company. So they exist by a different set of rules than your independent promotion will and does. They have a lot of masters to serve. The WWE does. And as such, they are trying to walk the most broadest line that they can when they are trying to appease their fandom. This is not a new thing for them either. They have done this. They will continue to do this. And it's not as if, because they've shown footage of it all throughout, it's not as if they do not hire, gay persons or LGBTQ persons. They're, throughout the roster. Like I said at the beginning, whether we know it or not, there's probably a dozen, that exist on any given wrestling roster at any given time. So whether if you are unaware of it, then you're just unaware of it. AEW, on the other hand, is kind of positioned as being more inclusive and what have you by having Nyla Rose and Sonny King. And did I say Sonny King? Anyway, Sonny Kiss is what I meant. And that's true. Although I think that this is one of those down points in that documentary. It does help push AEW, but a lot of that took place on AEW Dark and on YouTube. Did they show up on live TV? Yes. But I've never gotten the impression for the persons that they showed in this documentary, Abaddon, Sonny Kiss, Nyla Rose being the exception. And there's a few others that are throughout the montage. But as far as I can recall, most of them were not really featured on TV necessarily. They were in AEW, but like the young lady that came out, Danny Jordan, she was very emotional in this documentary that she came out as bi to her mom. Because up until that point, even when I met her, none of that was relative to who she was in and out of the ring and what have you. I thought she had a significant other at the time. I might be wrong, who was male. So, but again, what does that matter? Because Kiera Hogan had the same thing when I met her. She had a boyfriend, but she's since accepted herself for who she is. But in any case, AEW's kind of position is the more inclusive of the two. In my view, that's a little open for debate. That is one of the things I said is a little bit of a downside. Now, if you're going to watch this, my suggestion is, particularly if you're not of the community but you want to understand, as I did in this, the first 10 minutes of that you may want to skip. And I say this in all fairness to the documentary filmmaker. I say this in all fairness to Fuse TV, and I say this in all fairness to the persons that are in it. The first 10 minutes of this, I have a very difficult time agreeing with. It's not that what was said isn't true. It isn't a whole truth, in my personal opinion. I will explain that, and by saying there are points that, and it may just be the editor, but it does fall into the lap of the filmmaker as well. If he didn't say, hey, we should or should not use these pictures or footage, then he's just as much at fault there. But there's a portion within this documentary where they're talking about certain things where the footage or the pictures that's used would lean somebody who does not know wrestling history into the wrong direction. They use clips from WWE and other wrestling places pretty liberally, and I'm not sure if I would say that Fuse would need to make sure that all this stuff is cleared before they air, but I'm going to assume that they've already done that. One of the things they did is they thought, well, the Road Warriors, the Road Warriors were and this isn't verbatim, okay? So let me just be clear. I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth. I'm giving you a general summarization. But they basically used the Road Warriors as a representation of, well, this is what wrestling was like. Wrestling has always been very homoerotic, and they look like they came straight out of the leather community. And then they show a clip of the Road Warriors in like year one when they did come out with leather and the hats and the shades and the bikes and the chaps and all that stuff like that. So again, it is true, but it's not a whole truth. We have to take into account that this is taking place in late 70s, early 80s, NWA. And it might have been the reason they changed it altogether, because they didn't keep that look long. They got rid of it. They changed it. And then the next thing they showed the leather and the spikes, as to say that was part of the community as well. But I can't say that it isn't, but that's not where the idea stemmed from. The idea stemmed from the movie Mad Max: The Road Warrior. That's where they got the name. That's where they got the look. The characters within that movie were built to be intimidating. It wasn't designed necessarily as a symbol of representation. You know what I mean? So, whereas you could make an argument that, well, this is what they look like, and this is the outfits that's worn, and it's perfect representation. You could make an argument for that, but that is not the origin of that. That's what I'm getting to. So yeah, you could look at the movie. I seen it when I was a kid. Humongous on there, which then a wrestler, Sid Vicious, portrayed at one point in time as Lord Humongous. The Demolition, you could say the same thing. I mean, a lot of that was BDSM, but that wasn't what they were trying to relate on screen or in the arenas and whatnot. It was intended to be a point of intimidation. Now, you can make of it what you will, but that's what it was intended for. And if anybody is unfamiliar with it, that movie came out in 1981. Is Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior. And that's where, and if you go back, there's a lot of mohawks and face paint and hair dyed and leather and studs and all that stuff like that. So yes, does it have the element of that? Absolutely. But that's not what the design was initially. The same thing I would say, there's a portion in the first 10 minutes where somebody's talking about promo pics used by wrestlers are somewhat by nature homoerotic. Now, this I thought was somewhat of a blatant misuse of the power of your documentary. The rest of the documentary I thought was perfectly fine. This here really had a rough time with, because as they said that, they did show promo pictures. Again, like I said, this was a truth, but it's not a whole truth. They did show promo pictures, but they showed promo pictures from Shawn Michaels in Playgirl, Tori Wilson in Playboy, a very highly edited picture of Drew McIntyre in a WWE ring at WrestleMania with the WWE logo meticulously placed over his midsection so that it looks like he's naked. The WWE did not create that promotional picture. The other promotional pictures, yes, they are promotional pictures, but they were for Playboy and Playgirl. They're designed to be that way. They were designed to have a sexual overtone to it. So when you look at that portion of it, I was like, this is a little irresponsible for me. If you remove that, if you remove that first 10 minutes of it, it can be a very educational documentary. I don't expect everybody to go and watch it, because it is aimed pretty much at a niche audience. So take that with a grain of salt. I certainly hope that the persons that watch this who are not familiar with pro wrestling can at least do some research on their own to understand the other side of what was being presented here. Because like I said, the imagery used on top of what was being said in this section of it was not necessarily the best representation to be used. It's a little bit misleading in that regard. You get past that, then, and the talking heads of it are perfectly fine. A lot of educational stuff, if that's what you want to know. Susan Green talking about her career, them going back and talking about Pat Patterson, and I think the guy that authored his book and autobiography was talking there, went into his life again. Very, very educational stuff. Really, there's a good portion of this that they are talking about their sexuality, but they're going into their wrestling careers and what they had to do and whatnot. They did address the 80s WWF sex scandal. Asking the question, was Pat Patterson just an easy target? Did power get used, to sway people to do what they wanted to do? I mean, that's not beyond the realm of reality. So there's a lot of little things here that, if you're looking to be educated about it, I mean, I was educated to, things that I didn't know. And I have to give them that. But I also, when they're talking about certain elements of wrestling that I know very well, I'm like, okay, I don't know about that. So it's an eye-opening documentary. I want to say also Billy Dixon, who I did not know, I never met, don't know about, hadn't even heard of him before this. I thought he was a good talking head here. Danny Jordan, I thought also good talking head here. Ashton Starr, AC Mack, both of them, I thought, good talking heads. And everybody in this isn't necessarily gay. Lisa Marie Vachon shows up on it. Wade Keller shows up on this. SoCal Val shows up on this. So, you do have a lot of different points of view that's presented to you throughout the course of this. But I will say, if you are choosing to watch this, again, it airs on the 11th on Fuse TV. If I am, let me look at my my email and make sure that I am not giving you the improper date. But it is set to premiere. Am I right on this? Did it? No, I'm sorry. So I'm gonna rephrase that. It is set to premiere on Fuse and Fuse Plus on November 15th. November 15th. So I'm really ahead of this thing at this point. But again, if this is something that you find that you want to have more information about, if you have Fuse Media, you can also go to their website, and I'm sure that will probably take you to the link once it is up and available. And if I were going to rate this right now on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give it a 6.5. It would have done better for me if the beginning portion of it, the opening segment of which people are going to judge whether they are going to stay with this or not, had been done a little differently. And I think that falls onto the editor and the filmmaker. I mean, look, there's a portion of it where they're talking about, well, wrestling just inherently is homoerotic by nature. And then you have a clip of Ravishing Rick Rude holding, Roddy Piper in the bear hug. And then, there's footage of various other wrestlers. Now, whether they chose to have their footage in this or not, that's their business. But partially true again. Yes. Could there be an element of that? Sure. But you also are not accounting for, your King Kong Bundys and Big John Studs and Andre the Giants and Mad Dog Vachon's, Butcher Vachon. I mean, you could go on and on and on and on about the guys that's on the other side of that spectrum who do not look like some matinee idol and didn't come off as sexy at all. So, take that for what you will. Make your own choice there. This is the review that I give it. 6.5. If it's a scale, if 10 is the highest, 1 is the lowest, 6.5 for me as far as the documentary goes. Maybe a 7 if this opening 10 minutes were removed. So again, it's nice. I do have to say this. There's a segment I thought that was really good. As a matter of fact, I'm going to just say 7.5 because of this. I forgot about it. They did address suicide that has taken place just in wrestling because, some of the heartache and that some people have gone through, like Chris Canyon, who was known as, he outed himself, but he also was bipolar. So I'm sure that didn't help when he felt rejected as well. They talked about Joni Lawler, China, as we know her, and that unfortunate end for her. So there are portions in this that you're talking about people who have to overcome a massive hump in their personal lives in order just to live their life, and I again thought very eye-opening in that regard. And I certainly don't want to take anything away from that. So, and I want to end on that note, that if you are having that kind of problem, I am going to make sure that I put the link for the suicide helpline in there because, it's a difficult time to go through frustrations in your life when you feel like you're not being heard, you feel like you're not having your truth out there, or and it doesn't have to just be that. Just depression in general is a mother. Try not to curse here. So this may help. The hotline will be available. Watch this if you choose. You've now heard my rating. I have just upped it because I forgot about the segment that was there, and I thought that was really well done. Did not care for the first 10 minutes. Rest of it seems pretty fine. So with that, it's a good 7.5 out of 10. So thank you for tuning in to this. Thank you to Dinah White for providing this, and Smith House Strategy. Thank you to Fuse TV for asking me to give this review. I do appreciate it, and you guys, thank you for listening for this particular review. And we will see you on the next go round. Take care, everybody.